Good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here with you today. As part of his introduction, Tom said I've got a degree in chemistry. He's correct. I also have a degree in petroleum engineering. But I think perhaps, I guess nobody gives degrees in alchemy, but I think that would have been a good one to have gotten. Great to be able to make water. So anyway. It's great to be here at this conference. This is my second time in this conference, and the first time I think I described it, our 15-minute meetings with all of you as speed dating, and I again did some of those 15-minute meetings. Not some, I did a bunch of them. I counted them this morning. I think it was 44 15-minute meetings. I guess I could still describe them as speed dating, but maybe it's this time was a bit different. First off, I had at least heard of almost all of the issues that were brought up, and I had been briefed on. And I really appreciate the partnership that Reclamation has with NWRA. I had a chance yesterday to talk with Bob Johnson, another former commissioner. And, you know, he put these 15-minute meetings in perspective for me. And it was good to have that conversation before finishing them up, because I really started focusing on them that way. He talked about how it gives us a really unique opportunity to hear of the issues that we're dealing with from the stakeholder perspective. We hear about these all the time from our staff and from the perspective that our staff puts on it. And that's huge. We work very closely with you. But as well as they try to do it, they can't really communicate perhaps some of the importance of these issues the way you can. So I think it's incredibly important that we do this. The other thing that I've really begun to appreciate, even though they're very short 15-minute meetings, is that they're often, I don't know, certainly my staff probably does this, and I never realized it, but they're kind of clumped together with various stakeholder groups from the same general geographic area coming in one right after another. So I get to see something about the different perspectives of all the people that are being affected by some of the same issues, and I think that's important as well. And overall, I get a sense of how our regional staffs, our area offices are working with all of you, and I'm glad to see and to say that it appears that by and large, our area offices, our regional offices are working, have their finger on the pulse of what you're dealing with. And I really appreciate many of you complimenting their work. And, you know, there's times when perhaps we needed a little nudge on something, and that's all right too. But I really do appreciate just the ability to interact with you this way. So since last year, when I spoke at this conference at the Del Coronado in San Diego, I've been here for just a bit over a year. That means a couple of things. One, I'm done with my recusals. Last year I talked about how I couldn't deal with a lot of the issues that I had dealt with while in New Mexico. There's a couple that are still out there. Anything that has to do with the New Mexico's litigation with Texas, I'm recused from interacting on those for the duration of my stay here. So unfortunately, that means I can't interact too much with my friends from Elephant Butte Irrigation District. I have to just tell them hi as I come in and out of the hotel, but I know that they're being they're being dealt with by some of our other staff. So that's really the only recusals that I have left. The other thing that's happened is I served for the first 3 months, thereabouts, as the principal deputy commissioner because I hadn't been confirmed, but I did get confirmed in December, so that I was happy to have that happen. I've really come to appreciate our staff. I think we've got just an amazing staff, just great expertise. I've really come to appreciate our partners, all of you. You guys are amazing in terms of the wealth of knowledge that you bring to this, the commitment to what you do. And I've come to realize, and I think it's something that all of you realize inherently, but let me just say it. I've come to realize the huge importance of what Reclamation does and what you, our partners, do with us. It was interesting to listen yesterday to former Senator from Colorado and his emphasis on just how important what we do is. You know, as I've been flying around the West, I look down over the countryside and I see irrigated landscapes, and I see burgeoning cities, and much of that is possible because of the work that we collectively do. And so that's the West, but the West is a huge piece of the nation's economy, and the so what we do, I think, is really, really important, and I appreciate the partnerships that we have with all of you. So today, I'd like to talk to you just briefly about a few topics. One, aging infrastructure. Two, I want to talk a little bit about our hydropower and renewable energy work. I want to talk to you about our budget and funding, how we see that playing out this year. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about what we've been facing this year in terms of drought and throughout the West. So let me begin with aging infrastructure. As all of you know, and I've been reminded over and over and over in these short meetings that we've had, a lot of our infrastructure, water and hydropower infrastructure, is getting pretty old. Much of our reserved and transfer works are approaching 100 years old. Most of it is at least 50 years old. Some of it is approaching 100 years old, and some of it is older than 100 years old. Yet it continues to provide reliable performance. And it does because we, collectively, you and us, have done effective preventive maintenance. We've invested strategically in major rehabilitation and replacement activities when they're needed. And these investments, these activities, all the work that we do is intended to deal with just the general aging of our facilities, the new updated hydrologic information or seismic information that affects the way those facilities are going to operate or can be operated, new design standards, and just anything else that's going to be required to keep all of these facilities safe and functioning effectively, operating the way they were intended to operate. And not only the way they were originally intended to operate, but we keep putting new demands on all of this infrastructure and managing it for meeting a broader range of needs than I think what we had originally contemplated. So there's a lot of work that still is going to continue to be done. This infrastructure is getting older and older, and the money is tighter and tighter. Certainly, there's not a lot of money coming from the federal government. So we recognize that as we think about this future, we're going to be looking to you to pick up bigger portions of the cost in many instances, because we don't have another alternative, either initially or ultimately. And so we have put together an infrastructure investment strategy, and it's intended to improve the characterization and reporting of anticipated major rehabilitation and replacement activities for reclamation facilities. That information is going to be used to manage and prioritize extraordinary maintenance and dam safety modification, and to track deferred maintenance, and to identify additional tools and authorities required to address both the funding and affordability aspects of the infrastructure needs. We're going to continue to work with our local and regional power and water partners to develop strategies to meet those investment needs. And to that end, beginning last August 20th, we made a presentation here in Denver of the strategy at a public stakeholder meeting to begin getting some external input into that strategy. And we've continued since then. We've met with the Tri-State Group in Boise, Idaho. We've met with the Imperial Dam Advisory Board in Yuma, Arizona. And we're going to be meeting in January with the 4 States Irrigation Council in Fort Collins, Colorado. If you're able to participate in those sessions, that's great. If you're not, I really encourage all of you to give your input about this strategy to our area and regional offices. The people that you work with all the time, make sure that they bring up your concerns, that they bring us your input into this strategy. We will make it better together. So next I want to, and by the way, over the course of the 44 meetings that I've held over the last couple of days, I heard from quite a few of you about your interest and the perspectives about this investment strategy, and also about our directives and standards relative to excess capacity and so forth. So there again, your input is welcome, and we make sure that we hear what your perspectives are on it. So next, let me talk a little bit about hydropower and renewable energy. As I think most of you know, Reclamation is the second largest producer of renewable hydropower in the US. We own 53 power plants that annually produce enough electricity to serve 3.5 million homes. In March of 2010, the Department of Interior, Department of Energy, and Department of Army signed a MOU for sustainable hydropower. The purpose of that MOU was to help meet the nation's needs for reliable, affordable, and environmentally sustainable hydropower by building a long-term working relationship, prioritizing similar goals, and aligning ongoing and future renewable energy development efforts. That MOU is implemented by the Army through the Corps of Engineers, by the Department of Energy through the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, and for the Department of Interior through Reclamation. So over the last 5 years, through the collaboration and partnerships with those federal agencies, the hydropower industry and research community and stakeholders like yourselves, the agency has successfully fulfilled the commitments and promise of that MOU. In March of this year, the 3 agencies extended that agreement for an additional 5 years. This agreement renews the agency's commitment with a second phase of collaboration, and that second phase action plan includes technology development, asset management, hydropower sustainability, quantifying hydropower capabilities and value in power systems, information sharing, coordination, and strategic planning. The 2010 MOU, a 2-year progress report on that MOU, the signed extension, and the Phase 2 action plan are all on Reclamation's Power website. So if you're interested in any of those, I encourage you to take a look at those. And let me just mention that Reclamation has been generating hydropower, clean, renewable hydropower for decades. And now there's a real emphasis on that as a result of concerns over greenhouse gases and everything else. And that hydropower that's been there for decades is basically in the baseline accounting of what we're doing. We're, in terms of additional renewable energy sources, this is generally not counted. It's only when we add to what we're already doing that we get credit for it in that regard. So important piece of what we do. Let me talk to you a little bit then about our budget and how I see things playing out this year. We're currently operating under a continuing resolution that's set to expire on December 11th, just like the rest of the federal government. But as I'm sure all of you have heard, the president signed a bipartisan budget agreement this last Monday. So I think that agreement has raised the debt ceiling, presumably through about 2017, and it's increased the budget caps by about $80 million over the next 2 fiscal years. And so that's led to some optimism that perhaps Congress can complete work on the 12 fiscal year 16 appropriation bills for the president's signature before the December 11th deadline. And we expect that the individual bills will be packaged into an omnibus, and although, as always, there's a chance that things could get bogged down, perhaps as a result of legislative policy writers that are being considered. In which case, Congress might again opt for a continuing resolution. I would expect that if they did that, it would be a full year continuing resolution. The current fiscal year 16 House and Senate Energy and Water Development appropriations bills are generally pretty supportive of the president's budget request, including the infrastructure needs and water supplies operational requirements for endangered species and water smart program. There's a few things that are still in flux and of concern, and that would be of interest to members in this room. One, the Senate has chosen to hold the Senate bill would hold the Indian water rights settlement to fiscal year 15 levels of about 90 million. That's about 22.5 million less than we think we need to keep on schedule to implement the settlements, the timelines of those settlements. The House, on the other hand, they supported the president's budget request in that regard, so they'll have to work that one out. With regard to certain environmental commitments for the San Joaquin River Restoration Program in California, the House deleted about the entire amount that was requested for that. That was $35 million. That is important because it would implement the settlement that resolved 18 years of litigation in California. The Senate did, however, include that funding in their bill, so that also will have to be resolved. There's a couple of provisions that were included in the president's budget that were not included in the House bill. One has to do with increasing the appropriation ceiling for the Secure Water Act by $100 million. This is where we get, this authority is critical to continuing water smart grants and a few other programs that are associated with that. Second, our proposal to extend the California Bay Delta authorization through fiscal year 18 was not included in the House bill. The Senate did, however, include both of those in their bill. So again, that's going to have to be worked out in conference. Finally, both the House and the Senate have once again, like last couple of years, added monies to certain categories within our budget. The House included $31 million, most of which, about $29 million of that, going to be used for rural water construction of currently authorized projects. The Senate would the rural water projects, and I've got to tell you, and many of you represent some of those projects. People are really concerned about the pace at which those projects are being built. But we'll continue to work with you. We're hopeful that a budget agreement, that the budget agreement has cleared the way for a final bill for the fiscal year 2016, and that this will allow for continued congressional support for Reclamation's mission, and a path forward for the President to send Congress a good bill for 2017. So now let me just talk a little bit about what we've been facing this last year in terms of drought throughout the West. Obviously, the bullseye has been on California. For the second year in a row, it's been incredibly dry out there. Depending on how you measure it, I'm sure that you guys have read this, California has been in, people describe it differently. Some people will say 4 years of drought. Others will say, well, it's 8 years of drought with one good year in the middle. Regardless, others looking at tree ring data and other information would say this is the worst drought in 500 years. By another measure, it's the worst drought in 1,200 years. Regardless, any way you cut it, it is incredibly dry out in California, and the demands have never been greater out in California. So it has been incredibly challenging to meet water supply demands out there. And in that vein, back in January of 14, Governor Jerry Brown declared a drought state of emergency. That was following 3 years of drought. And our Central Valley project in California has been experiencing the driest period on record. The President, the Secretary of Interior, and Congress, several congressmen have toured the drought-stricken areas, and they've proposed a broad array of federal actions to try and address those drought impacts. As of late September, overall Central Valley project storage was less than 50% of normal. Allocations to the Central Valley project agricultural service contractors south of the Delta were zero for the second year in a row. 0% allocation. Senior water rights holders received an allocation of 75%. That was on paper. They actually received something less than that, probably close to 60%. Reclamation, throughout this, Reclamation has been working really closely with the California Department of Water Resources, the Fish and Wildlife Service, the National Marine Fisheries Service, the State Water Resources Control Board, and with stakeholders, the public, and Congress to manage to figure out how to best manage that very limited water supply. So I talk about the Fish and Wildlife Service and the National Marine Fisheries Service and so forth and the State Water Board. So many of the constraints on how much water can be pumped are environmental constraints, whether they be about the fish or water quality issues generally. And that's taken a huge amount of coordination to try and squeeze out additional supply and get some flexibilities in what otherwise are extremely difficult environmental regulations. We've taken a number of actions to increase that flexibility. This includes, we've been working with our stakeholders in California to facilitate transfers and exchanges of water, and to make sure that as we do that, we don't impact senior water rights holders or the operations of the CVP overall. We have developed a drought contingency plan together with the state water resources, and submitted it to the State Water Resources Control Board back in January of 15. It's provided a roadmap for how we did operate this year. And we've worked with the State Water Resources Control Board to get temporary changes to their water quality flow requirements. We've kept in almost continuous contact with our contractors so that they know why we're making the decisions that we're making and what those decisions mean for them. And we've kept in almost continuous contact with Congress. They obviously are very concerned about the water supply, and they have their constituents certainly bending their ear about, can't you do something? Well, that's why I said that perhaps alchemy would have been a better resource. It'd be great if we could make water. We can't, but we can try and manage what we have, and that's what we've been doing. Last year, we got $50 million of additional monies for drought response, and of that amount, almost 20 million went to projects in California, in the CVP. That was used for water transfers, temporary barriers, wheeling water, and to acquire and convey water to refuges and to diversify refuge supplies. Additionally, the Department of Interior added another 8.8 million to CVP to support operations and maintenance, fish passage, and fish screens, and for agricultural water use efficiency. Reclamation staff at regional and area levels continue to meet with our stakeholders and to hear and understand their concerns with regard to, we continue to review the laws and policies and guidelines to squeeze out whatever additional flexibility we can in this tough time. And currently, we're working on developing a 2016 operations plan that will consider the possibility of a continuing drought. We still don't know. Recently, we've been hearing a lot about El Nino, how there's almost a record strength El Nino, and so a lot of people are saying, finally, relief is on its way. Unfortunately, we can't say that relief is on its way in California. If we look back at big El Nino seasons in California, I heard this from our Deputy Secretary recently, and he had compiled some data about the last 9 strong El Ninos. Of those, 3 produced above average precipitation, 3 produced way below average precipitation, and 3 were right about average. So that says it's anybody's guess. Nevertheless, I think I guess what I'm saying is we can't expect that the El Nino is going to get us out of this thing. We've got to prepare for a continuing drought if that's what comes at us. And we already have begun to hold drought contingency meetings, again, with our other resource management agencies, the Fish and Wildlife Service, NIMPS, the California Department of Water Resources, and the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and the State Water Resources Control Board. We're working with local districts on projects for groundwater banking, groundwater recharge, water conservation, water recycling, and drought resilience to improve water use efficiency and resilience overall. Through the San Joaquin River Restoration Program, we're helping the Friant Division contractors design and construct groundwater recharge and banking facilities. And we're providing something like 14 million in cost share for projects totaling over $30 million. They're at various stages of development. And we've given a number of water smart grants over the years for water conservation, drought resilience, and contingency planning. Since 2012 through 2015, those have funded 11 separate projects in California, totaling something like 8.7 million in federal funding. Looking forward, in January of 16, Reclamation will announce a preliminary assessment of CVP supply. In February, we'll announce the initial allocation to be made available under the contracts. And so I've talked a lot about California because that's kind of the ground zero for the drought right now. But even in Washington, and whoever thinks of Washington as being a drought prone, but they are. And in the Yakima Basin, they have suffered through drought. Oregon has suffered through drought. Washington, throughout the entire West, you've seen how there's been huge forest fires as a result of some of the drought that's ongoing. Just moving to reviewing the situation in New Mexico. In New Mexico, the Rio Grande and the Pecos have fared quite a bit better than they had in recent years. I think I've been talking to my friends from the Pecos River Basin, and it seems like I would say they're pretty much completely out of drought. Their reservoirs are full. They've been getting a lot of rain. In the Rio Grande, they got good rain over the summer, and that really helped them out. But yet, the reservoirs are not anywhere close to full. El Vado Reservoir is the closest to full, and it's still less than half of capacity. In the Great Basin, Wyoming in 2015, they had well below average runoffs for the spring, but I think they've gotten a good rainfalls over the summer. Less than half of the major reservoirs within the Great Basin filled in 2015. On the Colorado River, just like California, Colorado River is currently experiencing the worst drought in over 1,200 years by some measures. And 2015 marks the 16th year of continuous drought and the worst drought in a 100-year record, that's for sure. Lake levels in Lake Mead are the lowest since Mead began filling in the 1930s. Yet, the Colorado River contractors have yet, in the lower basin, have yet to experience a shortage. That's the value of having two huge reservoirs. The reservoirs are right now being operated under some interim operational guidelines that were adopted in 2007. Those guidelines include shortage criteria and allow for coordinated operation of the two large reservoirs. In additional efforts to address drought, there's $11 million that's been made available for system conservation pilot projects, for voluntary efforts that would demonstrate ways of keeping water in the reservoirs and extending that supply. Both the upper basin and the lower basin are making use of that water and have submitted a lot of projects for consideration. That work is going well. But those are really demonstration projects. The upper Colorado River Basin states are pursuing drought contingency plan that has three major components. First, extending operation of the Colorado River Storage Project above Lake Powell to move water to Lake Powell during critically low periods. Second, implementing voluntary demand management programs utilizing a broad range of projects from agricultural, municipal, and industrial sectors that would reduce depletion of Colorado River water. And third, augmentation through weather modification. In the lower basin, they're also pursuing contingency projects and drought response plan. The lower basin signed a drought response MOU aimed at trying to add between 1.5 and 3 million acre feet of water to Lake Mead by the end of 2019. Frankly, to date, that has not been very successful, but they continue to work on it. And additionally, Reclamation is continuing to work with stakeholders to identify longer-term options for the Colorado River. So that gives you an impression. Much of the West has been in drought. You know, East Texas had been in drought. Recently, all we've heard about is the flooding in East Texas. So all of this is just perhaps showing us a taste of what we've got to prepare for in the future. If climate change forecasts are correct, we're told that we're going to experience larger or tougher and drier, more frequent droughts, and perhaps also more periods of intense flooding and that sort of thing. So all the more reason that our infrastructure investment strategy has to be robust. We're going to have to make this infrastructure work under all conditions. We continue to work with making money available through the WaterSmart grants to improve efficiencies, and I encourage all of you to utilize those. It's not huge infrastructure plans, but it is making a big difference. We've been tracking the conserved water from WaterSmart grants, Title 16 projects over the course of the last seven years, and in that time frame, we've tracked something on the order of, and this is not the exact number, but pretty close to 1 million acre feet of conservation savings as a result of that. We're also implementing a drought response plan. We are funding 12 drought resiliency projects, receiving $3.4 million. We're helping 11 entities create drought contingency plans to the tune of $1.8 million. And all of these are efforts to support the National Drought Resiliency Partnership. Reclamation additionally continues to work on emergency response actions under the drought response plan, but we're really trying to focus our drought efforts in terms of really creating resiliency. Drought is not a one-time issue. If we're gonna make and spend money on dealing with an issue, let's have it be a solution that provides ongoing benefits. So in closing, I again just want to thank all of you for the input that you've given me over the course of these speed dating sessions, if I call them that again. I know that you're following closely what Congress is doing, and Congress is certainly interested in trying to enact some drought legislation for California, but perhaps it'll have elements that will affect some of the rest of the West. We're following these things very closely as well. Deputy Secretary Connor testified on several bills earlier this year. And by and large, there's a lot of good ideas in some of these bills, but there's also a lot of things that would try and dictate the way we operate, and I don't think that's ever really helpful. While I think Congress has the best of intentions in terms of telling us how to do things, it really reduces our flexibility, reduces our ability to respond to the actions as they happen if they are too prescriptive in terms of what they ask us to do. There's a number of initiatives there's a lot of interest in additional storage projects, particularly in California, and there's a lot of study that's going on. There's some new ideas for amendments to the dam safety program that would allow for additional benefits if we're doing a dam safety project. Keep your eyes on these bills. Stay engaged with us. And again, I'll end with, again, thanking you and really appreciate this opportunity to be here. Thank you.